The scratching came just before dawn, soft, hesitant, almost like knocking. Elena opened the door and froze. There, on the porch, lay a bobcat kitten, barely breathing, its fur clumped with blood, ribs rising shallow and fast. But it wasn't the wound that made her knees buckle. It was the torn scrap tangled in its fur. Red, faded, frayed along the edge, a piece of a flannel shirt she hadn't seen in over a year, the same pattern Lucas wore the day he vanished in the fire. And just like that, the past clawed its way back. Elena sat on the cold wooden floor, back against the cabin wall, a fleece blanket draped over her legs. In her lap, wrapped in a towel and trembling like a leaf, was the bobcat kitten. She hadn't moved in nearly an hour. Outside, the mist still clung to the treetops. The sun had started to rise behind the Blue Ridge Mountains, but its warmth hadn't yet reached the cabin porch. Inside, the fireplace cracked softly, its amber glow brushing the contours of Elena's tired face. She named him Ash. It just felt right. The way his fur was mottled grey and ember brown, the way his breathing stuttered like wind over coals. But more than that, it was what he reminded her of, what he carried with him. Ash was no more than 2 or 3 months old, but his body was already marked by too much. Dried blood matted the fur near his left haunch. There were scratches across his side and a limp in his gait. But what arrested her most was what she'd found tangled in his fur, a thin, torn strip of red flannel. That pattern, that fabric. She hadn't seen it since the day she lost Lucas. It had been 11 months, nearly to the day. Elena Reyes, 27, had once been a rising emergency nurse at Asheville General. Quick-handed, calm under pressure. She worked the night shift and liked the rhythm of the dark. It was quieter, more honest. Lucas had been the opposite, sunlight and spark. A forest guide with a laugh that cracked through silence. Their weekends were all boots and backpacks, trails and small fires under stars. The forest was where they fell in love. And it was where she lost him. The fire hadn't been large, not at first. A gust of wind, a snapped pine branch, a faulty camping stove. It happened in seconds. She remembered the smell first, then the roar. They had been packing up when he'd realized his bag was missing. "It's just 10 steps back," he'd told her, already running. It was more like 50. She waited too long. Screamed his name too many times, and when the smoke turned black and the ground burned hot beneath her boots, she fled. Alone. The rescue teams found signs of the blaze, scorched earth, twisted metal, but no body. "The heat," they told her, "can reduce everything." Closure offered through science. She didn't buy it, but she also couldn't fight it. Elena took leave from the hospital. Then she resigned. The sirens, the beeping monitors, the smell of disinfectant, they all began to feel like ghosts pressing in on her. Every emergency reminded her of the one she couldn't undo. She moved into the old cabin they'd dreamed of buying together, on the edge of Pisgah Forest, and spoke to no one. Not her colleagues, not her parents, not even the trees. She filled her days with silence and routine. She organized the pantry alphabetically, fed the birds, dusted the same bookshelf every morning, but she never opened the wooden box under her bed, not once. Inside that box was all that remained of him. A photo of them beside a waterfall, a hand-scrawled trail map he'd made for her birthday, a tin compass with "Find Your Way Back" etched on the lid, and a folded red flannel shirt with one missing sleeve, the same shirt he wore the day he vanished. Now part of it had returned, wrapped around a bobcat's body. Ash let out a weak, rasping breath, and Elena's hands moved instinctively. The training came back in layers, as if unearthed from within her bones. She checked his pulse, his hydration, cleaned the wound with saline, then disinfected it gently with a soaked gauze pad. He flinched, but didn't fight. She used a pediatric dropper to give him water, warmed a towel in front of the fire, and tucked it around him. The heat helped. His breathing slowed, his ears relaxed. "You're not wild," she whispered, brushing the fur between his eyes. Not all the way. He stared at her, gold-green eyes dimmed by pain but still watching. She felt something stir, something old and tender and dangerous, hope. She made him a nest in a wicker laundry basket lined with her thickest scarf, Lucas's scarf. Then she sat by the fire again, hands trembling slightly. Ash slept, but Elena didn't. Instead, she reached beneath the bed and pulled out the box. She opened it slowly. The contents hadn't changed, but the air felt heavier. She touched the shirt, brushing her fingers across the frayed seam where the fabric had torn, exactly where the strip in Ash's fur had matched. It wasn't her imagination. Something was out there. Or someone. By mid-morning the mist had lifted. Birds sang as if nothing had changed. But Elena sat at her window watching the trees. Ash stirred once in his sleep. A tiny, soft chirp escaped his throat. Elena turned her head slightly, just enough to see his small body curled around the scarf like a memory rediscovered. "I don't know who sent you," she said softly, "but I think you're trying to lead me somewhere." She exhaled slowly, her voice steadier now. "I'm listening." The smell of antiseptic still clung faintly in the air, a scent Elena hadn't noticed in months. She hadn't used her medical kit since leaving the hospital, but today it sat open on the kitchen table beside a half-finished cup of tea and a sleeping bobcat. Ash lay on his side in a nest of flannel and fleece, his breaths now deeper, slower. The swelling on his haunch had gone down, and the worst of the dried blood had been gently sponged away. His ears twitched in his dreams, and a soft, rolling purr, too wild to be domestic, too young to be threatening, rumbled from his chest. Elena was wiping her hands with a towel when she spotted something she'd missed. Just beneath the patch where she'd removed the red flannel scrap, near the back of his front leg, a second thread protruded from his fur, thin, glinting in the light. Her heart picked up. Carefully, she reached for her tweezers, parting the matted fur. As she pulled, the edge of a weather-worn fabric square emerged, dull grey, streaked with soot and threaded with orange piping. She didn't need to guess. It was from Lucas's pack, the hiking backpack he never went anywhere without. The one with the external strap that always frayed, no matter how many times he re-stitched it. She recognized the patchwork because she had stitched part of it herself. They'd joked once about how it could survive the apocalypse, and now it had survived a fire, in the fur of a bobcat. She sat back slowly, her vision blurred. The kettle whistled in the background, high and sharp. She ignored it, because now the memories were coming. Not just the grief, but the details she hadn't let herself revisit in nearly a year. The morning Lucas left their tent early. The sound of his voice calling out, "Be right back, I just dropped my map somewhere." How she'd laughed and tossed him a granola bar. "Hurry up, I'll break down the camp." Then the smoke. Then the crackling. Then the silence. She had told herself, repeatedly, that it wasn't his fault, that no one could predict lightning or faulty gear or forest winds that turned a spark into a wall of flame in minutes. But a part of her had always wondered, why hadn't he come back? Now, staring at the cloth in her hand, That question bloomed again, but this time with a dangerous twin. Had he ever left at all? She rose to her feet, every movement deliberate. From the drawer, she took the compass, his compass, and opened it. "Find your way back." The needle quivered in the morning light. She stood by the window. The trees outside glistened faintly with dew. Somewhere out there, among the oaks and ashes, a truth was waiting. Something this small creature had carried across miles of forest and memory. Ash stirred again. He lifted his head slowly, blinking at her with heavy-lidded eyes. "You found me," she whispered. And now she had to find him. She packed quickly, gauze, bottled water, a flashlight, the compass, and the fabric scrap now sealed inside a sandwich bag. She placed Ash gently into a lined carrier. He didn't fight her, just blinked slowly, as if he'd expected this all along. Before locking the cabin, she glanced at the photo still resting inside the memory box. Lucas, smiling, his curls damp from river mist, a scar faintly visible on his collarbone. He hated that scar, called it his lightning tattoo, from the time he got caught on an exposed ridge during a storm. She touched the glass. "One last trail," she murmured. The gravel road twisted out of her driveway like a grey ribbon. Pisgah Forest waited at the end, but something else did too. Ash shifted in the crate. His nose twitched. Then he made a sound, not quite a meow, not quite a growl. It was a sound of recognition. And maybe of return. The trees rose like silent monuments, their trunks soot-stained in places where fire had once touched, but not destroyed. Elena's boots crunched softly over gravel and pine needles as she stepped out of the car, Ash's crate clutched in one hand, the forest opening before her like an unfinished story. This was the service road that had once led to the trailhead, the one she and Lucas had hiked every spring when the trilliums bloomed and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and cedar. But now the path was less clear. Some signs had rotted away, others were warped by heat and time. Ash made a soft, restless sound. She knelt beside the crate and opened the latch slowly. The kitten hesitated, then stepped out onto the earth, paws delicate, precise. He blinked up at her, then sniffed the air, and without ceremony began to walk. Not randomly, not nervously, with purpose. "You're leading me somewhere," Elena murmured, and followed. They moved slowly through the underbrush. The trail was overgrown but familiar in strange flashes. A mossy stone she remembered sitting on, the charred remnants of a wood post, once part of a ranger's map stand. Every few yards Ash would stop, glance back, then continue. He wasn't bounding or playful now. He was focused, navigating like memory lived in his paws. After 20 minutes, the brush thinned, opening into a shallow ravine, and Elena froze. There, caught between two young saplings, was something half buried in ash and mud. She dropped to her knees, hands trembling as she brushed away debris. It was a compass, Lucas's compass, not the one she kept in the box. This one, its metal casing blackened, the chain snapped, was the original. The one he always clipped to his backpack, the trailblazer, he called it. She flipped it open. The lid wobbled, but inside the needle still floated, stuck slightly to the east. She exhaled a shaky breath. This wasn't coincidence. This was trace. Proof. Ash stepped beside her. Nose twitching, and then he lifted his head, ears high, body alert. A sound echoed through the trees. It was faint, distant, not animal, not wind, a low, dull clink, metal on rock. Elena stood slowly. Her heart beat faster now, not from exertion, but something else, the fragile, terrifying stirrings of belief. They moved again. Ash trotted ahead, now weaving between trees, guiding her deeper into the woods. The light shifted, thinner, dimmer. Shadows fell differently here. It was quieter, heavier. The kind of stillness that lives where people don't go anymore. And then she saw it. A tree. Not tall but wide. Blackened on one side, bark peeled like old paint. And on its trunk, 3 parallel claw marks, not from a kitten, from something older, stronger. She approached slowly, reached out. The grooves were fresh. Elena turned in a slow circle. "Ash!" she called, voice barely above a whisper. He stood 20 feet away, tail stiff, his gaze locked ahead. At first, she saw nothing. Then, just beyond a curtain of ferns, a cabin. It was barely more than a shack, tucked against the slope of a hill. Moss grew along the roof's edges. The walls were patched with uneven planks and scavenged tin. Smoke curled from a crooked chimney in a wavering ribbon. Ash moved toward it without hesitation. Elena's steps slowed. Her heart thundered. She reached the clearing's edge and paused, unable to take another step. Because standing on the porch, bent over a wooden crate, sleeves rolled to the elbows, skin tanned and scarred, was a man. He turned. She dropped the compass. "Lucas!" He didn't move at first. Neither did she. Then, slowly, as if he were afraid to shatter something, he stepped down from the porch. Closer. His hair was longer now, his jaw thinner. There was a thick scar along the left side of his neck that hadn't been there before. But his eyes, those eyes were the same. And when he spoke, it was with the quietest, rawest voice she'd ever heard. "Elena!" She stepped forward, legs unsteady. He took another step. And then she was in his arms, her face buried against his shoulder, sobbing without words. His body trembled beneath her grip. "You were gone!" she gasped. "I tried to get back," he whispered. "But I couldn't. I thought if I came to you like this, if you saw what I let happen, you'd never—" "I would have given anything just to know you were alive." Ash sat a few feet away, tail curled neatly over his paws, his ears relaxed now, watching, still. Lucas knelt and reached out. Ash sniffed his hand, then pressed his head gently against it. "Found him the day after the fire," Lucas murmured. "He was just a few weeks old. I thought, maybe if I could save something." "Even one thing." "You saved more than one," Elena whispered. She stepped back just enough to look at him fully. His shirt was tattered, his boots worn, but around his neck, hanging by a thin leather cord, was a familiar shape. A ring. Her ring. The trees stood quiet again, but now the silence wasn't empty. It was full of breath, of memory, of a reunion that no one could have believed, not even her. But the forest had remembered, and so had he. The air inside the cabin smelled like cedar, old smoke, and something else. Earth, maybe. Or time. Elena stepped across the threshold slowly, her hand grazing the rough doorframe. It was like walking into a dream half-remembered, or a photograph faded at the edges. Lucas stood near the fireplace, stoking embers into life. Ash had already curled up in a worn wool blanket by the hearth, purring faintly. Outside, the woods settled into dusk, long shadows reaching toward the windows. Neither of them had said much since the porch. Now, in the dim amber light, Elena could see everything more clearly. Lucas's skin was weathered, sun-touched, and marked with healing burns. His left hand moved slower than the right, stiff in the fingers. And on the side of his neck, the thick scar traced like lightning, a memory etched into flesh. But his eyes, still steady, still brown-green, still his. "I tried to find you," she said, her voice low. "I know," he replied. I almost came back 100 times, 1,000. She sat on a wooden bench near the fire. Her legs still felt like water. So why didn't you? Lucas sat across from her. His posture had changed, more guarded, more grounded somehow. But his voice cracked gently at the edges. I didn't think I should. He let the words hang there, heavy and unflinching. I was the reason it happened, Elena. The stove I packed. It leaked. Caught a spark when I tried to light it. I thought I had time. I always think I have time. I told you to stay back while I grabbed the bag, and then the fire just took everything. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Lucas stared into the flames. I got turned around. Smoke was everywhere. I fell trying to climb out, landed wrong, hit my shoulder. When I woke up, I was in this place with a man named Owen. Elena tilted her head. Owen? Lucas nodded. Old trapper, used to work wildlife rehab, lives even deeper in the forest. Off-grid. Saw the smoke and went looking after the fire cleared. Found me half buried under a fallen pine. Said it was a miracle I wasn't Ash myself. His voice dropped on that word. Ash. That's where he got his name, Lucas added, looking down at the kitten now fast asleep. From what I woke up to. A cabin surrounded by silence and smoke, and a box of orphaned bobcats Owen had rescued from a development site the year before. There were 3, only Ash made it. Elena leaned forward. Her fingers brushed over the old coffee table, tracing a groove in the wood. And you've stayed here? All this time? I couldn't face what I thought you'd see when you looked at me. Not just the scars, the failure. Her eyes met his. Lucas, she said, and his name came out more like breath than sound. You didn't fail. I left you behind. You tried to come back. He looked away. She let the silence be. Let it stretch. Let it hold them both. Then softly, she asked. So, how did Ash find me? Lucas gave a quiet, almost incredulous laugh. I don't know. He started disappearing for longer stretches. I thought he was hunting. But then he came back one morning with that red fabric caught in his fur. I knew it was from the old flannel. The one you always stole from me. I didn't steal it, she whispered. You left it on purpose. He smiled, the kind of smile that happens when someone remembers how to feel something they thought they'd lost. I did. Outside, an owl hooted long and low. Inside, the fire crackled. Ash stirred once in his sleep and shifted closer to the flames. Lucas's hand reached across the table, palm up, open. Elena looked at it. She didn't take it right away. But after a moment, after her heart steadied, after her breath slowed, she reached back, their fingers laced together. And for the first time in almost a year, she didn't feel alone. Not in the forest, not in her skin, not in this moment, which felt too fragile to speak over. So neither of them did. They just sat together. The next morning broke slow and blue-grey, light creeping through the mist like a secret. Birds stirred gently in the canopy overhead, and dew traced silver lines along the wooden steps of the cabin. Ash was gone. Elena stepped outside, heart immediately clenching, her breath rising in the cold. She called softly. Nothing. Lucas stepped out behind her, wrapping a scarf around his neck. He does that sometimes, he said. Just vanishes into the trees. Always comes back. Though. But Elena felt something different this time. This wasn't a kitten wandering for fun. This was movement with purpose. She scanned the trail, then bent down to inspect the edge of the clearing. Tiny paw prints, light but determined, led away from the cabin and down the ridge. I'm going after him, she said, already pulling on her boots. Lucas didn't argue. He just grabbed his jacket and followed. The forest had a different energy that morning, brighter somehow. Despite the lingering cold, the mist clung closer to the ground, moving in slow currents. Birds darted through patches of light. The world felt poised, like it was holding its breath. They followed Ash's trail along a slope she didn't recognize, steeper than the rest, veined with roots and damp stone. At one point she slipped slightly and Lucas caught her by the elbow. His grip was steady, familiar. They didn't speak. After what felt like half an hour, they reached a clearing. And there, standing still as stone at its center, was Ash. He didn't look up, didn't move, just stared at something ahead. Elena followed his gaze. At first, she saw only trees, then a shape, a tall, narrow wooden marker, weather-worn, tucked beside a boulder, almost hidden in moss. It wasn't man-made, not officially, but someone had carved symbols into the wood, rough, jagged, a triangle, a line, an open circle. Lucas stepped forward, brow furrowed. "I've seen this before," he murmured. "On Owen's maps, he said they were markers, places where boundaries blurred." Elena tilted her head. "Boundaries? Between wild and not wild," he said quietly. "Places animals return to, instinctively, generation after generation, like something stored in the land." She stepped closer. Her fingertips grazed the carved wood. It felt warm. Ash padded forward, placing one paw gently on the stone beside the marker. Then he sat, curled his tail around his legs and closed his eyes. Still. Like a sentry or an offering. And Elena understood. This was where he had started, or maybe where something had started for him, a place of memory, of calling. "He was never just lost," she whispered. "He was bringing us here?" Lucas looked at her, eyes soft. "I think he was trying to finish what we couldn't." She turned toward him. "You mean the trail?" "No," he said, stepping closer. "I mean us." They stood together, the three of them, in a silence that felt like ceremony. Then Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled something small and round, a stone, smooth, dark red, polished by years of river flow. "I found this the day before everything changed," he said. "Plan to give it to you." Elena took it, cradled it in her palm. It was warm, as if it had held on to the sun. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "So are you," he said, with the kind of honesty that needed no build-up, no clever phrasing, just breath and truth. She looked up. And for the first time since the fire, she allowed herself to really see him. Not the guilt, not the scars, not the time lost, just him, alive, here, with her. Ash let out a soft, throaty chirp, and when Elena turned, she saw he had risen again, stepping slowly back toward the trees. His head tilted once, and then he looked at both of them, waiting, not for direction, for decision. Lucas glanced at her. "You want to go back?" Elena inhaled deeply, taking in the scent of pine, damp moss, old bark. "No," she said, "I want to go forward." She reached out, laced her fingers with his. Lucas smiled. "Then let's follow him." The trail down was different. Not just the direction, but the feeling. Lighter, as if something had shifted, as if whatever weight they'd been carrying had been placed gently down. By the time they returned to the cabin, the sun had risen fully, casting gold over the clearing. Ash leapt onto the porch railing and stretched in the light, then curled into a soft circle, finally at peace. Inside, Elena and Lucas sat together beside the fire, not speaking, just breathing. Ash blinked at them once, slow and deliberate, before tucking his nose beneath his paw. Lucas turned to her. "So, what now?" Elena rested her head against his shoulder. Now, she said, we build something new. And for the first time, she wasn't talking about the past. She was talking about home. The next morning, frost glazed the edges of the window panes. The fire had gone out in the hearth, but the cabin was warm, warmed by breath, presence, and something far less tangible. Elena sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug. Steam rose in slow spirals. Across from her, Lucas was tying a bandage around his wrist where an old scar had split open. His movements were precise, practiced. She remembered watching him do this before, on camping trips, during first aid classes they took together. But now it was different. The lines around his eyes, the caution in his posture, the way he moved as if each step required permission from the earth itself. There was something quieter about him. Wounded, yes, but also stronger in some silent, unmoving way. Ash dozed beneath the table, belly gently rising, a paw twitching in sleep. "So," Elena said softly, "why did you stay?" Lucas didn't answer right away. He adjusted the knot on the bandage. His hands stilled. "Because I thought that was the only way to make it right." She looked at him. "You mean punish yourself?" "Maybe, at first, but then—" He exhaled slowly. Then it became about something else. His eyes drifted toward Ash. "I saw what the fire left behind. Animals scattered, injured, dying. It wasn't just us. It was everything. The forest burned, but it didn't die. It adapted, and I wanted to help it heal. Even if it meant staying in the ashes." He looked back at her now. "I just didn't think I deserved more than that." Elena reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Her touch was light, but steady. "You do," she said. Lucas swallowed. "And you? You came out here to disappear?" "No," she said. "I came to remember. But I stayed because I couldn't find a way forward." She glanced down at Ash. "Until someone brought me a trail I didn't know I needed to follow." They were quiet for a while after that. Not awkward, just still. Like the forest itself, holding space between breaths. Ash stirred, stretched, and wandered to the window. He sat there, eyes half-lidded, watching the morning unfold. Lucas rubbed his hands together. "I don't want to keep hiding." "You're not?" He looked at her, unsure. She nodded. "You're not hiding anymore. You're healing. And there's a difference." Lucas smiled faintly. "What if I want to do more than heal?" She tilted her head. "I've been thinking," he said. "What if we turned this place into something real? A rescue station for animals like Ash, for people like us?" Elena blinked. "You mean like a sanctuary?" "Something small, just a few pens. Education programs, maybe? Kids who've lost things coming to help creatures who've lost more." Her throat tightened. "You'd stay?" she asked. He met her gaze. "Steady. I'd stay? If you'd stay with me?" Ash looked back from the window, as if sensing the question floating in the room. Elena stood, walked to Lucas, and wrapped her arms gently around his waist. "I already did." Spring arrived in quiet waves. The first signs were soft and small, shoots of green pressing up through thawed earth, birds nesting under the cabin eaves, and the slow return of warmth that kissed the forest in gold each morning. It had been 3 months since Elena had found Ash on her porch, 3 months since the forest returned Lucas to her. Time hadn't undone the scars, but it had softened the ache. The cabin had changed too. What was once a place of hiding had become a place of tending. A place of return. Lucas built a new fence around the clearing, half wild with native flowers, and converted the old storage shed into an animal care space. Clean floors, open windows, hand-labeled jars of herbs and salves. Elena brought her medical skills out of retirement, only now her patients had fur, feathers and claws. Together they opened what they called the Wild Path Sanctuary. No signs, no website, just word of mouth whispered down the mountain and carried by those who needed it. Children came first, quiet ones, shy ones. Some walked with crutches, some carried grief like old coats, too heavy for their age. They'd come for the animals, but they stayed for the silences between stories, for the way Ash would walk straight to the child who wouldn't speak, settle beside them, and place one paw gently over their hand. He had become something more than a bobcat. He was a thread between worlds, a creature shaped by fire and loss, now guiding others through the smoke. One evening, as dusk painted the treetops in coral and rust, Elena stood at the edge of the clearing with a sketchbook in hand. She often drew now, not as escape, but as remembrance. Tonight, her fingers moved without effort. Lines shaped Lucas's silhouette as he crouched by the stream, fixing a water basin for the fox cubs they'd rescued. Ash stretched beside him in the grass, his tufted ears catching the light, his body relaxed, in a way it had never been when they first met. In the corner of the page, Elena drew the red scarf, Lucas's scarf, caught on a branch, fluttering in the breeze like a signal to the sky. She smiled softly. Behind her, the cabin window glowed with firelight. The scent of fresh bread drifted on the air. Later, curled beside Lucas beneath a patchwork quilt, Elena listened to the soft breath of the forest outside. She pressed her face against his shoulder, where the scar traced like a river. "I never asked what it was like," she said quietly. "The fire." "No," she whispered. "The in-between." Lucas was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. "It was like being suspended, like time didn't know what to do with me. Everything slowed down, but the guilt, it never did. It got louder." She nodded against him. "I felt it too." He turned, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "But then Ash found you," she smiled, "and brought me back." They never spoke of closure anymore, only continuity. It's the idea that some bonds aren't meant to be broken, only stretched, transformed, hidden in the folds of time until something brings them back into light. Sometimes it came in the form of a child's first laugh in weeks. Sometimes it was the moment a hawk with a healed wing took flight again. And sometimes it came in the smallest, quietest gestures. A slow blink from Ash. A shared breath beneath the trees. A red thread returned. On the first anniversary of Ash's arrival, they held a small gathering. No ceremony. Just a circle of those who had found something of themselves in this place. A boy who once couldn't speak now told stories to baby raccoons in a whisper-soft voice. An old woman who had lost her partner painted feathers on the barn wall. Lucas played a soft tune on the old banjo he'd repaired, and Elena lit a lantern, letting it float up through the dusk. Ash sat at her feet, his eyes reflecting the flame. Someone asked her, "What made you stay here?" She looked at Lucas, at Ash, at the sky, and said only, a whisper. That night, after everyone had gone, Elena stepped out into the clearing alone. She carried a small wooden box, the same one she'd kept sealed under her bed for nearly a year. She knelt beside the oak tree near the fence line and opened it for the last time. Inside, the photo, the ring, the first compass, and the flannel scrap that had once been tangled in Ash's fur. She placed them one by one in the earth, not buried in grief, planted like seeds. She pressed her hands to the soil and whispered, "Thank you." The wind picked up gently, carried her words through the branches. Ash stood nearby, still as stone, watching, guarding, remembering, And in that stillness beneath the stars, Elena felt it. Not a voice, not a vision, just presence. A sense that love, real love, doesn't disappear. It transforms. It walks on quiet paws. It returns when we least expect it. Some hearts we think we've lost are just finding their way back. If this story touched your heart, stay close. Here on Paw Prints and Stories, we believe some bonds never end.